Thank you, Christine, for joining me here in the next episode of the Confos. And we are neighbors in Squirrel Hill.
Yes.
And when was the first time we met?
You held an event in East Liberty
Yes.
where some people were reading or just talking about their stories.
Yes. I have the poster right there. Stories of Struggle and Survival.
Yeah.
I think it was at the EECM across from Home Depot.
I know it was in East Liberty. Let's just leave it there, because otherwise we'll get confused.
All right, so this is the Home Depot and Target. So it's around that area, and it was really cool. I think
it was really good.
Yeah.
I friended one of the people that I met. That was a speaker there.
Yeah.
Who gave an excellent talk. So yeah, I think your events that I know about are great. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy to know you, as you know.
Yes, and then after that we had a follow-up meeting and our lovely commonplace joint.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cup of coffee.
and then we we talked, and then we shared our I guess, I don't know, passion or vocation. I mean, it's hopeful right now. I think it's a kind of blended together for me, at least, passion and vocation of knowing a lot of people in Pittsburgh. Right. So basically, Squirrel Hill is right here, right? So this is where we are.
Yeah.
And I've been interviewing some people across this 90 neighborhoods, and my goal is to cover the entire 90.
That's a great goal.
Yeah, and I think it's doable. It's just finding the people who would like to talk about their lives and their struggles and their successes in podcasts or also on video in public. So.
I'm enjoying the map because I'm a lifelong Pittsburgher. So
right.
There's some memory lane up there,
Yeah. So would you mind sharing your life stories in Pittsburgh? Where were you born?
McGee Hospital in Pittsburgh. So
wow.
I mean, everything I've done is let's call it my home base, because I like to travel. I like international things, but my home base is Pittsburgh. And it's I grew up actually in Wilkinsburg, and then I eventually changed schools, and I graduated from high school at Allderdice, which is in Squirrel Hill. And I went there for a reason. I was actually not in their area, but I went there because I wanted to broaden my social horizon, which I had at least an inkling at my young age that I was living in a weird bubble. And so I thought perhaps Allderdice would expand that.
What do you mean by bubble, if I may?
Well, I was in a suburban environment, and it was very monolithic. And I was, after I left my grade school, I went to Edgewood High School. This was before there was a merger. And, I was like an outsider, but it was it seemed like an insular kind of community. Not to say terrible things about Edgewood here, but it was, they knew each other, the other kids knew each other. And so I wanted out of there. And I thought, I'm not. And people said, well, Allderdice, don't go there. There's violence, there's some drugs, and there's this. And I thought, well, good, let me see. So I talked to my parents, and I said, look, I want to go to Allderdice. So that's what happened. I was surprised that they were okay with that, but they were. Fortunately for me, my parents were a bit busy in their own universes, so they just said, oh, yeah, okay. So next thing I knew, I was at Allderdice. And then I worked a little bit, went to the University of Pittsburgh, and then I went to the University of Pittsburgh Law School. So I am one serious Pittsburgher.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, during my summers undergraduate and then even in law school, I was always looking around for some way to go somewhere else. I'm very interested in foreign places or not, but and languages, cultures, all of it. So.
Yeah, there's a great opportunity with what do they call it? Like a summer abroad?
Right. I did that every summer. I was looking around for some way to get funding to go overseas. So I was sad when I became an official adult because it took a long time to have enough money to do it again.
Okay. So let me ask you this. I mean, just a reference. I mean, just in case my kids, or I guess only one, right? I mean, is asking about this program. So, do they actually study in summer abroad?
I would say yes,
All right.
but who cares? Would be my second response. Because my first summer I was in Germany at an intensive language institute,
Mm.
and the other students were from all over the world. A lot of times when we say, "Oh, I had a foreign experience," we mean like French and German people were there or something. But this was like all over the world, and I was just heavenly. Like I had friends from Jordan or just anywhere. And so, who cares if you're studying? Although I did, I learned German. It improved markedly when I got back. Then I had another experience. I worked for Bayer. It's pronounced Bayer, but no one here knows that. So we say Bayer, aspirin, or whatever. And I lived in a Turkish workers' dorm. Turkish people were kind of a minority in Germany. Their country's big minority, and I got to live in the Turkish workers' dorm and work with the foreign guest workers before moving to an office. So it's invaluable, right? And then the next year, I went to the university there, and I did produce work, but I must say I'd never walked away with any deep friendships with Germans. But I developed friendships with the other people struggling to adapt to these, offbeat experiences in a place that was unfamiliar.
Yeah. So were you there in Germany when the wall was still on?
Yeah. Oh yes, I was, and I get it when why am I so enthused to say yes like that? Because every time I went there, during those 3 summers, I found a way to go to East Germany because I had this German language, and I could kind of get 2 for the price of 1 because there's this sort of socialist, communist kind of country, which was so stigmatized, at the time, which
As
is
Americans.
also now.
Yeah.
So I like, well, let me, if you tell me that something's got a reputation, let's say, I'm trying to get there. So I was in Berlin and deep inside of East Germany, and
So
all kinds of
you
experiences
needed visa to get there, right? And
Right, yes,
probably
I did.
all other
Yes, it was
checks that
right.
they had to do. And then going back too, they
I
had to
even
check you.
I drove a car on the transit routes. There were these transit routes that you could only go on those. Because I would go to Berlin, which was sitting inside of East Germany, which people don't really understand. So you could only go on these 3 official transit routes. So I actually rented a car when I was like 19, and drove on one of these transit routes with these
So you rented
hours.
in West Germany and then crossed.
Right.
So you must have one of the fanciest car in the East Germany when you drove there, right?
Well, I didn't bring the car in. I got you would get to West. Well, the experience of driving was interesting. But once I was in Berlin, then you could get a day visa. So I did these day visas, but also I went on like an official tour, which I don't love official tours. I like to be independent, but that was a way to get deeper inside of East Germany. So
that's fascinating.
those experiences were so meaningful to me. I even wrote my own walking tours of Berlin. I went with some friends, and we toured what the remnants of the old East, which are rapidly disappearing, and intentionally, I think. But so there's still some remnants to see.
Yeah. So I guess it is for the context for those who are too young probably to remember, or probably were not even born here, that so we used to have West and East Germany, and we used to have 2 countries after the World War II, right? So Google it.
Yeah. It's fascinating, honestly.
I think we can only equate it with the Korea right now, right? So if anyone has a chance, or I guess it's really rare to cross the border to visit North Korea and see what's about, right? And then drive back, which probably is impossible.
It's very worthwhile to read about East Germany. And then they had a very strong internal spy operation. I think 1 out of 6 people were part of that, of the populace. It was the internal spy system of East Germany was greater than the number of the people in the army.
Wow.
Yep. So that is a fascinating thing to read about, let me tell you.
Wow. So then you mentioned about you didn't have a deep relationship with Germans. Was it because you work in the your peers, or maybe because you mingled with fellow students who came from outside Germany, or was it just like by design, or?
Well, it wasn't by design. I would say generally I'm friendly, and in the places I've gone, I've made like lifelong friendships, but it just didn't happen. And I don't have a statistically significant survey to give you, but all I can tell you is it seemed very hard to establish a deep relationship there in the time allotted. Like, I think it takes more time. They're, in general,
Sure.
more standoffish, right? They're polite, but then you don't get behind the shield there, the barrier. And it was interesting as part of another thing I'm doing now, which is helping to support some schools in India. I got to meet an Indian artist who's probably the leading contemporary artist there, and she had spent time in Germany, and she had the same problem. And she just wanted to get out of there. And she has a whole series of paintings of people with basically their chest is open, so you can see their organs, but there's the heart. And that was inspired somewhat by her time in Germany. Like, I'm looking for the heart. And I don't mean to just bash Germany here, and I haven't been following it closely in a long time, but I would say it seems harder to do that. So I was happily engaged with the other students from.
Yeah. I think I think I can say that. Well, not based on my experience, but um, when I was a student in university, even I might say university as well as the junior college, that we immigrants, we mingle with other immigrants, right? I think it's not necessarily not by design, but we just gravitate towards
Right.
People who are experiencing the same thing, experiencing all these struggles of like, what is this? Let's take a look at dictionary. What is this word? How do you
I
use this word?
understand
What
that.
is the past, participle, whatever, right? So it's crazy.
That's true. I mean, I gravitated to the other foreign students, so to speak, for the same reason. And
Yeah.
I got a taste of that. I've never moved permanently to another country, but I remember going to the grocery store when I had the university summer, and I was in there for like 2 hours trying to buy basic, simple things because I didn't know what anything was, and trying to read it all, And this is Germany, which is not as well. It's different from here, but it's not as different as some other places.
Right.
And
right.
it was already plenty of struggle, let me say.
Yeah. So
Plenty of anxiety, but well worth it.
Yeah, I could relate to that. These were the days before you could just use your smartphone, use Google Translate, and say, "Oh, okay, Coke for 5 rupees or whatever." Right?
Yeah.
But that time we actually had to use a lot of sign language and say, "Oh, that."
Right. When I worked in the factory at Bayer, only for a short period, I was in this kitchen with these other women, and that's where they're putting what they call the foreign guest workers. Okay, so I was with women from all over the place, and they had a German supervisor, but no other Germans except for one young person that was like my age, and otherwise it was me and all these other women, and they spoke what was called foreigner German. So they didn't decline the verbs or anything; they just used infinitives. So if you're living there, you're not going to learn a lot of German on the job. And sometimes I understood, okay? And the German supervisor would comment about me right in front of me. She put me in a room, for example, with it seemed like a million plastic orange chairs. and I was given a leather cloth, and I was told to lay your lap and like, do not lose that. All right. And then there was a big thing of soapy water and a big thing of clean water. And the German supervisor said to the German student, keep an eye on the stupid American, make sure that she's not mixing up the dirty water and clean water. So I would hear this kind of thing all the time. And then I was young, so I didn't know cultural things as well as now. Although I still don't know. I mean, I don't know the world, right? But there was a Greek woman, and we would have to prepare all these foods and vegetables for lunchtime. And she said in German, "Oh, the Greeks don't love the Americans, and the Americans don't love the Greeks." And somebody said, "Oh, she's making politics here." And I had no idea. Like I didn't know a thing about our politics with Greece. So I had no idea why we hate the Greeks and the Greeks hate. So I was feeling out of my comfort zone on that topic.
Wow.
I just tried to be friendly.
Yeah, it's, as you're telling your story about the difficulty about, trying to find the nuance, like why this person behaves this way, saying all these things, all the cultural differences, and I think we or whoever are growing up right now, they're lucky. They have everything, on the smartphone. Like, what you said, like, oh, what's going on with Greek and American politics, right? You just like chat GPT or you like Google, like, what's going on? What's the history behind, right? All these
Right.
informations, if you read fast enough, and then you can, join back in the
Right, you have this
conversation.
computer. You're walking around with a computer, and your phone's a
Yes.
computer.
Yes. So, what other countries did you visit other than Germany? I mean, the summer abroad.
Well, I like I said, East Germany was a passion because it was much more different. So
Exotic.
that's much more interesting, right? But in my life, so to speak, I started to expand into other European countries, and probably the pushing the limits of that was the Bosnia and the Czech Republic. Bosnia, Croatia. I have been to the Czech Republic, Bosnia, Croatia, and Montenegro.
Was it during the war? Or
No, I was in Switzerland working in a fellowship when the Bosnian War was going on. And I became fascinated with it because I met a lot of people working on that. And they were struggling with the concept of whether or not they were helping or hurting. And genocide is also a topic that has been a subject of interest to me for my whole life. So, in terms of timelines, there had been a recent genocide there. So I thought I'd like to go there.
So you mentioned about that your interest in genocide. Why?
Yeah.
What made you? It's like it's a big thing, right?
It's a big thing.
It is like it's not like I like I just had my birthday and my I told my family what do you like that, and I want to have a good Black Forest cake. And the reason why I remember that there was a really great bakery in Jakarta, Indonesia, that I really love. That my first paycheck when I worked full time in Jakarta, my first paycheck, I went to that bakery to get my own Black Forest cake. There's no birthday. There's no nothing. I just wanted it. So I mean, because I tasted it and I got hooked. So okay, of course, Black Forest cake and genocide, completely different things. So what's your story about?
In what regard? What's my story?
Why why genocide? Why
why genocide?
Like
why genocide?
Yeah.
Black Forest cake and genocide are a transition that I was. So I got lost. But why genocide? Hard to say. Maybe because I spent a lot of time in Squirrel Hill, where there's a substantial Jewish population, and of course we have the Holocaust. And I remember in high school, I wrote a paper. We were told, find somebody, write about a U.S. history event, and find someone who lived through it and interview them, which I thought was a good assignment, actually.
That's very good, yeah.
But I decided to write about the Holocaust and what the U.S. knew and didn't know while that was going on. So that was hard, actually, to find books about. The main book was kind of out of print, and I got it from some older, another student's grandmother, Jewish grandmother, who borrowed it. They're more available now, but it seemed hard. And I learned a lot about, that was my first exposure to failures of the U.S. government, that maybe, because, we're brought up to, and we're inundated with messages that we're the best. And I'm not saying this isn't a great country, but every country has problems, right? So and bad behavior, and that was one of my first exposures to that. And I found a Holocaust survivor who was in the Warsaw Ghetto in a concentration camp when he was 16, and interviewed him. And then I tried to, in my 16-year-old way, juxtapose what was going on with him while the U.S. was learning this and this and this and doing not so much. That was my first exposure, too, to the concept that we didn't bring in refugees even up to the quotas that we had, even in extraordinarily hard times, which was an eye-opener. I think we should all be critical thinkers about our own governments. And like I said, that doesn't mean I don't enjoy my U.S. citizenship and think there's many great things here, but it started my critical thinking going.
Yeah, I think when we talk about problems, not because we don't like it, we don't like the country or don't like the city or the county that we live in. We just want it better.
Right.
And we have confidence that we could be better, right? Because that's why we want to solve the problems. If we really dislike the place, if we really hated it, of course, that probably we would have just gone somewhere else.
Right.
But since we have hope that, hey, we can do something about it, that's why we are zoning into the problems, right? Because I do have a tendency to sometimes, some people just told me straight up, why always talk about problems? Why are you so negative?
We should have more happy convos.
Yeah.
Well, I have happy things.
I mean, I love it.
And we'll get there.
Yeah, exactly. Or talking about the problems, I was, that recently, I don't know if you knew, but okay, this is way out of attention, but Jon Stewart had the problems, like a podcast on Apple TV, I think, right? It got canceled because he raised problem that the funders didn't like.
Right, you're not a patriot if you have any criticisms at all, and I think that's a problem around the world. We seem to be moving in that direction, but the pendulum swings one way, the pendulum swings the other. So I'm just gonna try to keep sailing along and hope for the best. But as for genocide, it was an exposure in reading these books to also the extent of human cruelty and also the extent to which people would organize to engage in cruel behavior, almost countrywide. Not all Germans, obviously, but, and I don't want to be bashing away at Germans here. The Balkans had their thing. I mean, there's been many genocides. And are. But that is, sometimes I think, in trying to understand human beings, if you meet an average regular person, let's say, I don't know what that looks like, but you learn more when we are acting in the extremes, almost like in caricature, So I thought, that was when I took up my German and psychology degrees or majors, and people would say, oh, they're so unrelated. And I'd say, well, not entirely, although I did love learning German, and I was pretty good at it, so it was keeping my GPA up, so I just kept pursuing it. And it was like falling along into this thing just because it was helping my GPA, and it became this whole life experience. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the roots of the genocide.
Okay. So you mentioned about your fellowship in Geneva, And was this for the ICJ?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me uh, change the screen here. So I have this ICJ.org website on, and so they say that it's composed of 60 eminent judges and lawyers. So okay, so were you part of this lawyers?
No. So I was in law school,
Mm-hmm.
and there was this fellowship that I was a research assistant to the professor who taught international human rights.
Mm-hmm.
And he noted the existence of this fellowship. And it was a competitive thing, I must say. It was operated out of the University of Buffalo. They did the selecting of candidates. And I remember driving there and, running into a ladies' room to put on a skirt and a blazer and all that, look right. And I got at this fellowship, and I ended up at the International Commission of Jurists, which you have on the screen, and that was for me. It was I felt lucky. There were many interns over there, many fellows that had a busy work, and my immediate supervisor had worked very hard to make sure that the people at the International Commission of Jurists were not just doing busy work. So once again, just like in Germany, I found myself in an office with people from Senegal and India and Iran, and I love that. And being a U.S. person was a kind of a minority thing, which also happened in some of the Germany stuff, and which is it's a good experience to not be in the dominant group, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
For those of us who could be seen that way, to go switch into that. But anyway, all that aside, I did work there. My role was to draft a document about the harassment and persecution of judges and lawyers, and we had pieces of the world assigned to us, and we would correspond with, like, I don't want to call them informants. In some cases, I guess they were talking secretly because of oppression in their country. So I found myself writing and on the telephone with lawyers and judges from, like, Laos and Bahrain. Was fascinating.
So which region were you assigned to?
The Middle East.
Middle East.
And portions of Asia.
Okay. All right. So I guess before they called you or before they report this thing, they have to speak English, right?
No, because you could almost, well, not every, you could find somebody in the office there who could speak a whole lot of things.
Okay, because I asked that question because you don't speak Laotian, right?
No, I don't speak all the Asian languages yet.
Right. So I wonder how the assignments were made, right? So why you do this?
Well, they had a French-speaking fellow, they had a Spanish-speaking fellow, and then they had me. And in German wasn't exactly where it's at in terms of, like, a wonderful language for international communication.
Yeah,
but English is, and there was enough English in the Middle East and Asian countries with the lawyers I spoke with. And if there was any problem, there was someone in the office I could go to. So we would write, and then and people would say, like, well, you're sort of, using today's terminology, defending the privilege, right? You're judges and lawyers, the persecution of judges and lawyers. But that's a big deal, because if you can't get a lawyer because your cause is unpopular and you hire a lawyer who gets killed, you can't really participate in the judicial system or even try to seek justice. So it was a bigger deal than I realized, I'll tell you. I mean, lawyers who got killed and tortured, although we had cases we reported on in the U.S. too, but another eye-opener. So even if I, again, just sat there doing nothing, even if I had a busy work experience,
Mm-hmm.
it could have been invaluable. But I learned a lot. I remember walking away, thinking after all of my reports that we wrote, boy, if there's terrorism in a country, everything goes to seed, falls apart. The whole legal system and the attitude of the population just crumbles, and human rights go out the door.
Yeah.
And it was kind of not so big of an issue in my personal life, but now in the U.S., we've had this, and it's everywhere, and human rights are falling apart everywhere too. So
Right. Right. And how long were you working as a fellow?
just again, I would do this for like 4 months,
Mm-hmm.
because I was in the middle of law school, but I dug in as hard as I could. I was working very hard on this report, and there were these legal officers, judges and lawyers there, and I was just overwhelmed with wanting to know more about them and who they were and what their country was like and how did they get there. And
Yeah.
so
Oh,
I just loved that.
so many stories,
So many,
right? And so many perspectives too. Like
so many.
even for an incident, there may be so many nuances and perspectives that go or for or against whatever case that you're looking at, right?
Right. And I was exposed to, like, I worked with a woman, a Palestinian lawyer, and occasionally we would go into the United Nations complex, and we were treated very differently trying to enter there with her in the car. We always had like a slowdown, and it was very expensive in Geneva. So those of us who were students would band together, and I learned that you could take a streetcar to France and shop for much less. And I went over there with some friends. One was Nigerian, and she was a law student, and she had such a hard time getting back through the border, even though she had all her UN papers and stuff. So those moments are just so valuable. And at the time, I didn't appreciate all of it, but as life goes on, I suggest to anyone and everyone to try to have overseas experience. It's like this butterfly effect. You don't know what that's going to lead to.
Yeah.
But it will make you, it's eye-opening and broadening. It's an adventure every time.
All right. All right. So I'm not planning to touch this case, but I think I have to, because you're again, talking about genocide, ICJ, and then also on the screen as I was browsing, and then on this splash page, it has this Gaza, Palestine, and
Yeah.
then I'm sure that this ICJ and a lot of other alphabets in Geneva are working on this and are trying to, I don't know, get understanding or how to get, I don't know, get solution. I'm not sure. So what do you think as someone who
Well,
had worked in this space?
I mentioned that my immediate supervisor was Palestinian.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to imply that I'm taken aside because, I had this but it of course has made me, that human connection has made me
Yes.
think about the conflict
Yes.
more and more and more. And also, I live in Squirrel Hill, where we had this horrible massacre at a synagogue. So I'm busily engaged watching and thinking and basically being horrified and upset and wondering how this has any positive outcome. If you told me you had arranged for me to speak with the head of any of these governments involved in this conflict and give them my best advice, I would say, please cancel it. I have no idea what to say here, how this ends.
Yeah.
How this has any, I mean, it's just, let me just say it's terrible. But I know I have these personal contacts in different directions on this, and it's hard to understand. And I think there's almost endless history about it that I'm not intimately familiar with, which is important.
Right. There are so many nuances. There are so many perspectives, that I guess for decades that it's been a problem that are just pushed, you know, away and away, not actually taking care of it.
They
Right.
brew and brew and
Right.
brew, and then the
Or is
lid
it
pops off.
right? Or like a kick the can down the street,
Right.
down the hill, whatever. Right. So whatever the saying is. Right.
Which I think is a lot of what politicians end up doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So all right. Now you're back in the United States, done with your summer abroad, your fellowship outside. So what did you do? So how did you bridge your experience working on this um, human rights, genocide, all this international law back to Pittsburgh, our lovely city of Pittsburgh?
Well, there was a large amount of time in which I didn't make so much use of that. I started a private practice with a friend from law school, which took me down a highly unexpected path. And in 1998, I remember getting a letter from the International Commission of Jurists that there was an assistant slot open, and I just felt sort of sick because I was at this terrible crossroads. But I felt it would be a huge betrayal of my friends with whom I had started this developing practice. And, you know, you never know what you'll find on a path, right? And so I was able to do a lot of public interest impact litigation because my law partner, while focused on medical issues, she was a doctor and a lawyer. While she was focused on that, she also was very interested in justice in society. So as long as I didn't fail to do my regular work, I could be off doing these impact cases. So I was a lawyer for the lead counsel for an appeal to establish the right of same-sex couples to adopt children together. I spent 8 years in litigation with the University of Pittsburgh to try to secure medical benefits for employees, same-sex partners. This was before marriage. So I feel like I was leaving a mark, and it was an important and good one, and I was proud of that.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Then it all came to a screeching halt.
Oh.
22 years in, my law partner died.
Oh, no.
And I had zero interest in going on. It was very traumatic. So I spent a couple years just being traumatized.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it was horrible, but that also can take you in whatever direction. You could be more empathetic.
Absolutely.
You could be more hard-hearted. You know, I'm trying for the former. So I immediately began Googling people from the International Commission of Jurists, thinking like, what are they doing now? What would have happened if I had done that? And it was more like a fantasy, like what would the path not taken, you know, be like? And I found that the legal officer for Asia, who's from India, Dilbar Parak, had given up this sort of premium job. It's really, that's a hard job to get. And gone back to Mumbai with nothing and started a grassroots effort to educate extremely poor children. And I thought that was really interesting because when you get to spend some time in Geneva, it's gorgeous. Everything's highly paid. But you sometimes wonder if it's kind of lavish, you know, sitting in a lavish environment, talking about the problems going on out there, and, you know, let's write some documents.
Everything is an abstract.
Right. And it has a function and value, but it's very hard to know what it is or measure it. And I wondered if Dilbar had that experience. And it turns out that's why she left. She was there for 5 years. She was going and giving presentations, going on fact-finding missions, making presentations at the United Nations, and people would nod. But then she would go back and everything seemed the same. And after 5 years, she walked into the Secretary General's office and said, I just can't do this anymore. And the reason was she needed to know that, her work was bringing results.
Right.
She needed to see that.
Right.
So now she does. And I thought that was kind of profound and fascinating. And suddenly I found myself going to India, which was a country I had not had any particular interest in, knew nothing much about, like, at all, other than, like, going to Indian restaurants. It's I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's true. So I was wildly reading hundreds and hundreds of pages of history books about India and trying to learn Hindi, which is one of the many languages spoken. And so I got my basic Hindi in there. But I opened up a whole new world.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, when you mentioned about that sometimes it's like a, I don't know, paradox or ironic, right? That you may be working on the world hunger, but yeah, you're sitting in a probably Michelin star restaurant in Geneva, just chatting away
Exactly.
about world hunger.
Exactly.
So, and
It feels bad. I feel bad in India, actually, because I have a real twitchy digestive system, and I just can't adapt to the food thing there. So I'm in these 5-star hotels, and when I'm out, I don't eat or drink anything but bottled water, because I get sick. And it's horrible. Like, I don't want to be in a 5-star hotel and go for a walk. Like, I was in one, and I went for a little walk on my own. Here's this slum on the beach right there. And I'm meandering about this slum on the beach, and then I go back up, and everybody's having their cocktails with little umbrellas, and maybe the cocktail's pink or green or something, and it's just terrible.
Right. So I wonder if someone has a currency with the stickers like, okay, that could save, it could give 10 meals, that could give 100 meals.
I know.
All right.
The contrast is stark. That beach, I'll never forget, because these dwellings on the beach right there were, there were people all over this rocky, unbelievably rocky surface doing their laundry, and to take back to these sort of shanties, and some don't even have a shanty, right? And so but it's not. The thing is, it's not different from here. It's just that we hide it better. The problem is more vast, but here we hide it. Right? You have to get in a car if you want to go see the poverty.
Yes. It's not shown because somebody doesn't want to look bad, right? Somebody wants to, I don't know, get reelected or whatever, right? So keeps their foundation flush with cash, right? Right. And as going back to several minutes ago, I mentioned that, the problems, let's talk about the problems. And sometimes we have to balance the positive news with problematic news, right? We have to know why problems exist. And actually, the reference of good would not exist if there's no bad, right? Good means there's something bad. Something bad because of something good. So
right.
they have to coexist.
They define each other.
Right? They define each other. So, that's how you join this Friends. No, Aseema is the
mothership.
The mothership, right? And then the Friends of Aseema is the organization based in United States to help the mothership.
Yes. Okay. I use the word mothership because people have a hard time separating them. So Aseema, the Aseema Charitable Trust, is what Dilber started in Mumbai, the woman from the International Commission of Jurists. Mm-hmm. And they started from scratch, and they now operate 4 booming schools packed, with children in extreme poverty and a waiting list. So it was we had a recent event, and they made a statement there that sums it up for me. I said that Aseema, it means limitless in Sanskrit, they believe in the limitless potential of every child, so they chose that name. Aseema is a place it's a simple good. This is what I said at this event. It's a simple good. It's not political. It's not religious. They don't discriminate. It's a group of people of all different types within India who are just trying their best to educate and provide medical care for these kids so that they can get up to a level where they have a chance in life. Because you can get so far down that it's fair to say that you don't have a chance. Maybe some crazy thing happens, but it's fair to say you don't have a chance.
Yep. Yep.
But these kids do, and they're over there proving that. So it's like this little island of goodness and harmony that is hard to find, because it strikes me that society here and everywhere is becoming quite a mess with conflict over every religion or your skin color or where you're from. You name it, there's conflict around it.
Yeah.
And this is not that.
Right. Yeah. So right now, I think every conflict can start from nothing, even from a Oxford comma. Right. So it can be a conflict. It's a ridiculous thing. Right. It could be important. I know. It can. A sentence can mean totally different thing, but it's just ridiculous, right? So let's bring it to a context where Aseema is. So let me change so we are here. No, not we are here. We are in America, and Aseema is in India. So India is in call it South Asia, right? So South Asia. Says India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, probably Nepal and Bhutan. Probably they are also part of South Asia. So Aseema is in Mumbai. Let me zoom. Where Mumbai is in the west coast of
West. Yes.
Yeah, west coast of India. Oops, not that. All right. I'm just browsing on the Google map here, and that's where Mumbai is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Mumbai is a city, or is a county, or is a province?
It's a city in the state of Maharashtra.
Okay. All right. So and then that's where where Mumbai in India is, and so I'm now showing a school, the Aseema school, right?
Yes.
So how many students are studying in this school, or how does it work? Is it like a American style morning till afternoon, or is it like an after school, or how does it work?
It's morning till afternoon, but the semesters, so to speak, are different. Like they start in June, and so it's the months are different, but it's otherwise similar. They call these things standards, and we call them grades, and it's very similar in that way.
Is it using the British style with the O level, A level?
They know. So one thing I want to say about Aseema, this is an interesting thing. These are public schools. They use the word municipal schools in India, but it would be public schools here. And the government of Mumbai has only ever allowed 6 organizations to do this, which is to engage in what's called a public-private partnership.
Okay.
What that means a lot of detailed things, but generally it means we decided that we trust you. Here's a building. Go and run it. Okay, renovate it and teach the kids so they have a lot of autonomy. And Aseema uses Montessori methods to teach the children. And it's probably, at these schools, you probably get the best education possible at a school in India. We had one supporter who said, I want to know why my hyper-privileged children in Haverford aren't getting as good of an education as these kids in Aseema.
Why do you think that is?
I think our schools have a lot of problems, and the regulation and governing rules for governing our schools are a problem. Society's kind of a problem in how we view in schools and separate them. I'm not an expert in it, but I have eyes, and these are not like charter schools really, because they have to raise their own money. Like I said, they get the building, and this building that you're looking at is looking nice, but it was there were no functioning drainage systems, and there were white ant infestations. There were 2 teachers for 7 classes. There was mold running down the walls. There were no usable like chalkboards. So it was a very it was a mess. Okay, so Aseema had to raise the money, and they renovated it, and we provide grants, and they get money from different sources, but we have supported classrooms, upgraded furniture, and some of the technology in the classrooms that like we're looking at on the screen here.
Yeah, also they have a projector, it seems, right? For a computer projector.
Yeah,
for the lessons.
That's right. We've sent grants for overhead projectors throughout the schools, and we also have done just sponsoring of classrooms. So you look at this, and whatever you see in there is involved in sponsoring a classroom. The technology, the educational materials, the food that the kids get, the field trips that they go on, the teacher's salary, the electric bill, every single thing of storage cabinets that goes into a classroom. We have done a lot of classroom sponsorships.
Yeah, and we're looking here like looks like a lab, like a science probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're very up to date. They tried to give the children the Bilber's philosophy is they should have the best.
Yeah.
Not what's adequate, which is a problem I think in the U.S., but the best.
Yeah, or here probably just passing the Common Core standard.
Right. They are far beyond that, and they make the schools attractive because it increases attendance. It's something I think that we don't understand in some of our ways that we allocate money here. Like, This is enough money for the school. Just throwing money at the problem won't fix it, but it fixes some things. It matters hugely. Aseema has a very good attendance rate. Their students score brilliantly on these standardized exams. And this Montessori method is kind of used the whole way through. It remains activity-based.
All the way to high school level.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
You have to understand, like, when they tried to teach the first class, the children didn't even have the neuromuscular development to hold chalk. And they didn't know what it meant to get in a line. So Maria Montessori was an Italian physician. We use Montessori here, like it's kind of like for rich kids' schools, but it wasn't supposed to be originally. She was trying to come up with methods to teach extremely disadvantaged children. So if you're walking all over the room freely and doing things as you learn, you're also lighting up parts of the brain that aren't lit up when you're just sitting at a desk.
Because it's a learning by doing, right? And
learning by doing.
When you learn by doing, it's not just one particular subject area, but it covers more than that, right? More like a comprehensive, it will touch, probably your humanities side, your scientific side, and your critical thinking. I think that's more like project-based learning.
Well, for photosynthesis, they're out in the garden.
Right.
For sound frequency, the teacher has a guitar in the room, The children work in groups, peer-to-peer learning, because one of the things, Aseema always says value-based education, and I find that vague, if you're just reading it for the first time. But the values tend to be, like I said, not politics, not religious, but altruism and friendship and supporting other people and trying to be a good person in life, as one of the students told me. Aseema was helping him to become a good person in life.
And the parents of the students don't have to pay a dime, right?
No, nothing.
Okay, so how can they enroll? Do they have to what is the requirement? I mean, I'm sure that you have more
You live,
applicants than
I'm
what
sorry.
you can cover, right?
Yes. They live, it's like our public schools. There's
Mm-hmm.
like a catchment area. So the schools are sitting in areas where they're surrounded by poor communities. And so it's a bit first come, first serve. Like I said,
Okay.
there's a wait list.
Right.
They do have a school that they completely own, built, and is privately run out in a remote tribal region to the northeast of the city. Actually, that's a photo of that uniform is that tells me that this is the tribal school.
So how many schools do you have? How many facilities, or how does it? Yeah, we show you guys earlier about the picture of the building. So that's probably the main building. So how many other? Was there like a remote location where you conduct schooling, or how does it work?
They built this school out in this region, which is an amazing. You have to almost go there to understand it because you're in this van or car and you're banging along these roads. You go through this tiny town called Igatpuri, and then you kind of bang along these ever the roads are in decreasing quality, and suddenly, and you see just hills. They're either dry and brown or they're soaking wet, depending on the season. And suddenly, on a hilltop is this magnificent structure. The tribal school is.
Oh, you're referring to a tribal school?
Yeah, the tribal school they own
this school they're
right
looking at.
is gorgeous. I don't even know how they got the machinery out there. I know that they had extreme difficulty doing it.
Okay.
And no money.
Right.
They were trying to find an architect, and Dilber went to this guy who also worked in an NGO, non-governmental organization, and she asked if he would help create a plan. And he said, "Well, how much funding? How much money do you have?" And she said, "Nothing." And he said, he slapped his hand on the table and he said, "I love this answer. I'm going to do it with you."
Which is, unthinkable in America when you say, yeah, nothing. I have nothing, but I'm going to do this anyway.
Right.
All right. So, how many years has this school been around?
The whole thing or the tribal?
Or what my question is that has anyone graduated from this program?
Yes.
And how do they perform? I mean, I assume after that they go to university or vocational school, or go to work right away.
That's right.
Right.
All of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So in India, or certainly in Maharashtra, I can't swear it's the same everywhere here, but you go through 10th grade, and then you take a board exam, a standardized exam. Then what would be 11th and 12th grade to us is called junior college. And after that, you would go on to a university or undergrad program, or like you said, just go into a vocation straight out of there. And then their rate of, I think it fluctuates all the time, but within the last few months, I asked the head of the Alumni Association about it, and he said 95% are either employed or in advanced education.
Wonderful. That's pretty high.
It's really amazing. It's really high, and it's shocking and wonderful to see. And the shock when I tell people stories, like I had this event here in Pittsburgh recently with some art. Like the shock when you see the incredible art that they make, the scores that they achieve, is a lesson in what you thought, or what I thought, could be done by children like this.
Yeah.
Right.
And how can we help?
Well, there's two ways to help. There's this fascinates me. So I never was in nonprofit stuff. I never was a fundraising person. So everything I'm doing with this organization, Friends of Aseema, which I'm president, is like a learning curve. I feel incompetent, like I'm climbing learning curves every day of my life here. But the ways to help the way to help is money. Okay, the way to help is to donate, because this takes money. You know, and it feels crass sometimes because I'm saying that this island of model of hope and change, but that's a fact. To do this, you have to have money. The second thing is spread awareness about it. Just tell people about it. You know, we're a smaller organization, and I'm trying to get the word out. We can learn from this. And when you learn from it, and the more contact you have with it, I think the more drawn you are to support it. And that's been a change this year. People are starting to already know about it. And people are starting to appear out of nowhere and support it, offer fundraisers. I was in San Jose. Some woman contacted me. She's a singer, and she just had a benefit concert. Instead of tickets, it was did donations to Friends of Aseema.
Yeah, wonderful. And it reminded me last year or 2 years ago that Priyanka Chopra was part of your, I don't know, how do you define it? Was it part of your fundraising, or how did you get involved?
Well, you know, that's just a weird, interesting twist in my life. So, you know, I was Nick Jonas and the Jonas Brothers, you know, I was a bit after the time when they were, and a big hit. So, but when COVID started, the Indian government responded with an attempt to stop the spread by having these very strict lockdowns. That was really hard for these poor people because they have so little money, and now they can't even get that. Mm. So they were stuck at home. So Aseema began raising money for what are called daily wagers. Okay, they you know go to a construction site hoping to get hired for the day. So we pitched in to help raise money, and Aseema distributed food to 10,000 people like 10 times, and they distributed school supplies to pioneer remote learning in this context was an amazing thing. Mm. But when they came back, as here children were kind of behind, but Aseema kids were doing better than most who were coming out of COVID. But during that time, Priyanka Chopra Jonas, she likes to have the Jonas added, I've learned. But I can only imagine that her researchers found us. They were looking for ways to help with the daily wager problem of these people stuck at home with zero food and zero income. And their income is so low, they can't save a lot. So suddenly, out of the blue, here is this Instagram post by Priyanka Chopra Jonas and Nick Jonas listing places to donate to, like Doctors Without Borders, and then it said Friends of Aseema, our thing here in Squirrel Hill. And I had to look at the thing like 100 times.
So who found it? Did you find it, or somebody else?
Somebody else did.
And then forwarded to you?
Yeah, because I didn't even know how to use Instagram. Like I'm computer illiterate, you know, and I barely can understand Instagram, and I have screenshots of posts by Nick Jonas and Priyanka Chopra Jonas, and that meant a lot because you never know, like I said, what connections happen in life. When I was out in San Jose at this concert, it was Indian Americans, immigrants generally, and Madhuri Murli was the host of it, and you should look up her. She's quite a good performer actually, and she puts a lot of value and heart into her life. But she found us because she saw Priyanka Chopra Jonas posting about it. And just then, this past year, she reached out and said, hey, I want to do this thing here. So next thing you know, I'm out in Silicon Valley at this benefit concert. I was kind of the only white person there, I think, you know, which is also always a good experience.
Yeah.
But they were wonderful. It was fun. And then here's somebody's expanding our donor base. And I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm thinking, this happened partly because of Priyanka Chopra and Jonas. I'm like, how weird is life sometimes?
Yeah. Great. It's it's fascinating. You know, I think hearing your stories, you know, from Squirrel Hill and then back to Squirrel Hill.
Back to Squirrel Hill, okay.
Right? And now you're doing Friends of Aseema, helping them, and then how you how you'd like to keep your your life broad and abroad, right?
Yes.
And that's fascinating. And thank you for sharing. And is there anything that you'd like to add or?
Yeah, I'll say one little thing about this. I mean, people balk sometimes about donating for something overseas, and I want to say that you can donate overseas and locally. But this is such a model for change, and I don't know why we shouldn't support something that we just know is good. And it's making these fascinating connections. I just want to share this one little story. The benefit concert was an interesting story to me in my life anyway. But so I was at a market in Sewickley,
Mm-hmm.
outskirts here of Pittsburgh, and we're selling products from Aseema. Aseema has household products with art on it, and we sell high quality art prints of the children's original artwork. And this guy just came rushing over and saw that we had a print with a harp on it, and that a 14-year-old child from Mumbai in extreme poverty had made this art. So we didn't have it on site, so I called the printer. He needed it rapidly as a gift for a Tuesday night thing. So I went and got the print, and I hurried up, and I drove it to Sewickley. And this guy from Switzerland, Joel von Lehrber, who's one of the world's foremost harp players, was giving a concert. And the guy just saw this harp, and this was his gift. And I wrote a story of that class. I know about the class in which it was made. So I have this photo of this famous harpist in Sewickley holding up with his big smile a piece of art from a 14-year-old, poor kid from Mumbai, and just, it was so beautiful.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your life story. Thank you for sharing your passion. And so on the website or on the wherever that I'm going to post this, I'm also going to attach where you can donate and help Friends of Aseema.
Thank you very much. And I want to say our website is all done for free. Almost everything you see we ever do is me talking somebody into.
Yeah.
I'm trying to talk them into getting
me free services. Pretty good at
it. That's where the lawyer part helps.
All right.
We learn to be pushy.
All right.
Thank you so much, Bill, for having me.
Thank you.